everyone, and welcome back to Alpine Intel's The Savvy Adjuster podcast, where we discuss some of the insurance related topics important to adjusters with the experts who know them best. I'm your host, Senior Account Manager Chris Nichols. Now, before we begin, just a quick reminder that Alpine Intel's service offerings are designed to provide innovative solutions to all of our clients across not only property, but auto, liability, and workers' comp insurance fields. We are committed to helping our customers reach peak performance throughout the policy lifecycle. Now, today, I'm once again joined by Alpine Intel's Customer Education Director, Jay Dykstra, who is here today to talk about one of, if not the most commonly reported causes of loss to electronics and electrically powered specialty items, which you probably guessed is lightning. But we're also going to be talking about another frequently encountered cause of loss, which is high voltage surge. Now, quick disclaimer before we jump in. Each claim obviously is unique, and on this podcast, we tend to speak in general terms, right? It's important to get an expert assessment to make sure you have all the facts you need to make an informed settlement decision that really accounts for all the evidence related to that specific claim. That all being said, let's get started. And first and foremost, Jay, thanks again for joining the podcast.
Absolutely. So glad to be here. I always like to help the adjusters out there, especially with these tough topics. And it's definitely great to be back. And I can't wait for our conversation today and lead to some good outcomes for our adjusters out there that are listening.
Absolutely. I'm really actually excited about this one. We do talk a lot about lightning and surge claims here at Alpine Intel. And so for our listeners, before we dive in, who haven't gotten a chance to maybe catch one of our other episodes that you've been on, would you mind letting us know just a little bit about your background, not only obviously here at Alpine Intel, but prior to joining the team here?
Sure. So I've been with Alpine 6 years now. So believe it or not, good time flies and going well and doing all of our webinars and carrier sessions and podcasts like this and things like that. But like I like to say on some of my other sessions I do with adjusters is um, when I wake up in the morning, I feel like an adjuster and I talk like an adjuster because I was an adjuster for many years out in the field. I was handling residential claims, commercial claims. I had plenty of opportunities to travel across the country, do catastrophe duty and things like that. So I still kind of feel like an adjuster. As a matter of fact, just this week, I just renewed my adjuster's license. So I am still a licensed adjuster on that as well. So after I was an adjuster, I actually went into a claims training center and I was a claims trainer for over 6 years. So really kind of just made it my mission to help adjusters throughout their processes and giving them confidence and credibility and things like that. So to make this very tough job just a little bit easier, right? So that's kind of where I am. I also very involved in things like HVAC and through our HVAC Investigators brand, and I also hold a EPA 608 license, which is the ability to work with, handle, talk about, and things like that. The refrigerants we use in the HVAC world. So. Um, very involved in these technical topics and here to help spread some expertise with everybody.
Listener, it goes without saying if you weren't already aware that you were in good hands here today with Jay, his explanation of his background should have solidified that. So we're excited to have you here, and yeah, as we say, let's dive in. So lightning is a commonly claimed cause of loss, but sometimes objective assessments often determine that it's actually not the cause at all. Can you speak a little bit about why policyholders may often believe their electrical equipment has been damaged by lightning?
I can, and we have three different lightning and surge classes we do, and I'm going to tie kind of all that stuff together as we talk today. And of course, I think a lot of people understand this if they've been around Alpine at all. Is we're a very data-driven company, so we got a lot of great information on this as well. So there's one thing that is true, statistically speaking, is a lot of people do claim lightning as a cause of loss, but when after an on-site inspection, it's very low percentage of what's actually lightning, right? It's very easy for people to claim that. I mean, it gets down into like 1 to 2% actually end up being lightning as the actual cause of loss. And as adjusters out there, they absolutely have to know what is the actual cause of loss so they can lay it up against the policy and get that right. So there is one thing that kind of jumps out and we talk about this on some of our other trainings and webinars and things like that, is why people think they've had a lightning strike, right? And you know what it is? It's thunder. So believe it or not, um, thunder is creates basically a sonic shock wave. When lightning bolt actually happens, it can raise the air temperature around it to about 50,000 degrees, right? And it actually that rapid expansion contraction of the air creates that sonic shock wave, right? So thunder is very loud. It creates that sonic shock wave. And of course, we've already had that lightning flash. So all of that being said, if you're sitting in your home, you might think you got hit by lightning, right? That sonic shock wave could be upwards of 200 decibels, right? If you know anything about sound, I mean, that's louder than jets taking off, the space shuttle, even a cannon shooting. The most closely related sound that loud would be like dynamite. So if your neighbor, I hope you don't have this neighbor, if your neighbors set off dynamite in their backyard and your house shook, that's kind of the same thing. Your house didn't get hit by the dynamite, it got hit by that sonic shockwave. That is thunder. And even though maybe the lightning wasn't even on the ground near this home, it felt you saw the flash, you felt it, you heard it. Maybe you think your house got hit by lightning. So that's really why people think their house got hit by lightning.
Yeah, on my bingo card for today, I did not have the square of learning how thunder is made, but I am glad that you, you went over that
I know people
explanation.
don't think about that, right?
I certainly didn't until about a couple seconds ago. So that's very interesting. And you're right. I mean, I see a lightning flash. I do the old. I'm going to count the seconds to see how many miles away it is. I don't know if that's accurate or
It
not
is.
anymore. Okay, perfect. Then I go 1,000, 2, and then all of my windows shake. And right,
Right.
if my TV then went out, I would absolutely assume that that was from that lightning, just based off the sound alone, right?
Right.
So
So
of
so
you know,
let's take that a step further, Chris. You do that count back, right? And see how far it is. And there is some legitimacy to that. It's not exact science, but it is. But what if you have one that's like really quick? I mean, it's like almost instantaneous. So you're like, oh, obsolete. So that was right here. So think about these statistics. Only 10 to 20% of lightning actually hits the ground, right? That's called cloud to ground lightning. The rest are intra cloud, cloud to cloud, and things like that. So it might be happening right above your house and it feels like it's there. It sounds like it's right there. But if it never hits the ground, obviously it can't cause damage. So that's something else to consider is, a very small percentage of lightning actually even hits the ground. You could have a storm move over your house, have a lot of lightning and thunder. That doesn't mean it ever hit the ground. And it's so there, you should not have damage and you should not have a claim on your desk for lightning damage.
that fact alone is amazing to me. I expected it to be much higher as far as cloud to ground, right? 80, 90%, but 10 to 20%, that's pretty interesting. So, um, as we're talking, obviously lightning can cause a power surge, and it does sometimes. But my understanding is that it's not the only potential cause of surge. Can you speak a little bit to maybe a few other factors that may be the actual cause of a surge event?
Sure. So let's go back to that cloud to ground first off, and then I'll talk about a couple of those others you mentioned as well. So cloud to ground, if it's hitting the ground, right? It's not actually hitting the house, it's hitting the ground. Could that come into the house? Could that be a surge? And the way that could happen and does happen occasionally um, is you have like an on-site lightning strike or even a tree strike on the property near the home. Guess what? That electrical energy, again, you hear the statistics out there like a lightning strike could be up to 1 billion volts of energy. Certainly, they're not all that big. They don't have to be that big. It's over 240 volts. Things in our homes can get damaged. But that energy now is in the ground around the home. Guess what else is in the ground around our homes? We have metal pipes coming in, bringing water. We have cable TV wires bringing in our cable TV or our internet. We might have an old phone line coming in. Not as many as those, but there could be, or even underground electrical lines. Um, some real popular ones now in a lot of areas are underground dog fences around the yard and wires going out to irrigation control systems. right? We have all these things in our yards underground. Electrical energy from a direct strike can be picked up by those and then come into the house, right? So that's an on-site strike, cloud to ground lightning that causes that surge of electricity to come in our homes and cause issues. But then we have just the electrical grid itself, right? And we could just call it the grid. That's your electrical utility company that is providing the electricity to the home, right? There's a lot of things with the grid that can cause issues, right? We have this thing out there called grid switching. Think about in your neighborhood or your town. Have you ever driven by like it looks like a small power plant? It's really a substation for the grid. At Depending where you are and how your grid is set up in your area, they may have electricity coming from one place, one power plant, one area, and going to different places. And different parts of the day, they may have to switch it because there's different usage amounts are needed. Um, and so they switch where the power goes. That's called grid switching. That can cause a surge event within the grid that can end up back in our homes and cause damage, right? One that is more common with the grid is when the grid actually shuts down, right? They shut it down for whatever reason. That could be an issue. It could be part of grid switching. It could be a catastrophic event within the grid, things like that. And then when the power comes back on, it surges and it has this flood of high voltages that can come back into our homes, right? So the old it's not a wives' tale, but you call it a wives' tale. The old adage, when the power's out, you should turn off your breakers or unplug your expensive electronics and things like that. That's actually true, right? Because you might have a surge from the grid come back into your home, right? So that's the grid issues. Now here's something more what I'd call close to home, right? Items within your home can cause surges, believe it or not. You have things like HVAC compressors. You have the compressors in your refrigerators. You might have a wood shop out in your garage, and every time you turn that table saw on and off and things like that, they can create mini surges within your home and cause damage to other things on those circuits, especially in older homes where the circuits aren't set up perfectly, or a home where someone has done a lot of DIY electrical and they're just tapping in here and there and everywhere else. So items within your home can also cause surges. So I know for adjusters, one of the tricky parts is they want to know what caused the surge. That is extremely difficult. Most people, even electricians, even engineers, things like that, if a surge comes and damages it, it's very, very difficult to say, was that from here? Was that from there? Was that from this piece of equipment and things like that? So we can identify it's a surge. You just can't always identify where that surge came from. But we just went through a lot of the reasons it could have happened.
Well, it is definitely easy to see how high voltage surge could be mistaken for lightning damage. I did not know about grid switching either, so I'm going to mark that on my bingo card here today as
That's
well.
right.
That's pretty interesting. And you're right. I don't, which I'm going to moving forward, but power does go out from time to time where I live. You call the power company, they say 2 hours, great, and it eventually comes back on. I never turn any of my equipment off. I leave it on to let me know when the power is back on, right? I use that as kind of my indicator. If once my microwave clock starts flashing, oh, power's on. But that's a good point that you make. Maybe a best practice for people moving forward is to maybe unplug a lot of those kind of high powered items,
I,
if you
I
will.
I would maybe leave a lamp on or something like that, something that you don't mind if the bulb bursts or something like that. But
Sure.
your OLED TV, your fancy refrigerator and microwave with those control boards in it, your HVAC system, things that you really don't want to lose and have to replace.
Sure.
You might want to consider protecting those a little bit, or unplugging them or turning that breaker off.
Yeah, a good best practice for our listeners here. So again, easy to see how high voltage surge can be mistaken for lightning damage. Obviously, experts can differentiate between the two, and really all sorts of perils, wear and tear, water intrusion, to get the adjusters the answers they need. But without getting wildly technical, although maybe a little technical, what are some ways an assessment can zero in on the cause of loss?
Yeah, of course. So again, you mentioned all kinds of cause of loss out there and things. They might say it's one thing when it's really something else and things like that. But for lightning, for especially for us at HVAC Investigators and StrikeCheck, our brands that deal with this the most, um, it's really going to require to be call it lightning. I mean, the house itself, the residence, the business, or on the what we call the residence premise, right? The ground around it really needs to have had a lightning strike. And guess what? With lightning strikes, there is going to be visual damages, right? There is so much energy. If it hits the building, or if it hits something attached to the building, or if it hits the ground next to it, you're pretty much going to know it, right? You can also use lightning data out there, lightning reports and things like that to say where this lightning hit. So that is the best way to identify lightning. So now all these other things. So we have something that's not working and we don't have any lightning data. We don't have the house being hit. We don't have any marks on the ground or split trees or anything like that. What happened, right? So, as far as using an expert, you need to really perform measured testing, right? Me as a pass adjuster, I couldn't go to a site and then walk in with my tool bag, open it up, take my screwdriver, open up a control board, and pull out my ohm meter and test it. That's just not something insurance companies want their technicians. I mean, not their technicians. They don't want their adjusters doing that, right? But that's really what's required in a lot of cases. You need to have somebody that's capable and trusted to do measured testing to see what's damaged, right? In these control boards, in these capacitors and contactors and things like that, electrical wires, circuit breakers, things like that. Um, that is the best way to identify surge. It's not lightning at that point. You've had something not working. If it's electrically damaged, it's going to all go back to that measured testing to make those determinations.
Well, and I think it's just a good point in general. I personally live by the creed of if it deals with electricity, I'm getting a professional out here. Maybe changing an outlet in my house, but 99% of the other times I'm going to yeah, get somebody out professionally. So well, good.
Right.
So that kind of explains other causes of surge that could be outside of lightning. But let's touch, and you did a little bit previously on the actual items themselves, right? I'd be curious to hear from your experience, what are some electrical items that are going to be claimed that are, say, particularly vulnerable to lightning and high voltage surge?
All right, sure. And I think to just follow up that last question as well is sometimes things just stop working as well, right? They just wore out. They're at the end of their lifespan and stuff like that. Oh, by the way, there was a thunderstorm last week, so that must have been what caused it, right? That lightning. So that does happen a fair amount as well. We have a lot of data that shows how what percentage things actually are claimed that are actually just worn out, right? And that sort of thing. So things that are susceptible. So lightning can hit anything, right? Lightning's that phenomena that just when you thought you saw it all, you saw something else, right? And lightning can jump from building products into electrical systems. They can physically damage something. They can also electrically damage something and things like that. But it's probably going to be pretty dramatic. So now when we're talking about surge, we're talking about it has to be something that's connected to an electrical system because surge is traveling through the wires as its path, right? So if you have something being claimed as electrically damaged, surge, um, ask yourself, is that even possible? Right? Was it plugged in? You have a lot of electronics like things like phones, tablets, things like that. As an adjuster, make sure you're asking, were they plugged in? Right? Where were you when this happened? If they said they weren't home when it happened, how did their phone and tablet get damaged if they were with them? Right? So things like that. Make sure they were plugged in. Um, there's also things like water heaters, like gas water heaters. They run on a standing pilot light. They're not connected to the electrical system. We see this all the time where they're being claimed for an electrical event or lightning or surge when they can't be because they're not even attached to the electrical system. So we get those things out of the way, the things that really can't be. So now let's talk about the things that can be. So things that have the finest or the most delicate electronics in them probably are going to be the first things that are going to be affected. Things that are low voltage. Thermostats are low voltage. Ground, like landscape lighting, can be low voltage. Some of these things within our electronics, can be low voltage and things like that. So start with that and control boards. Everything, I'm just thinking around my house, everything in my house has a control board in it nowadays. I mean, refrigerators, microwaves, HVAC systems, thermostats, everything's got a control board in it. Think of a motherboard from a computer. It doesn't take much to damage those, right? So think of those things first. Those are going to be the most susceptible. And then things that have like electric motors, right? Compressors, fan motors, blower motors, and things like that. There's lots of things. Of refrigerators, of course, have those same things in them as well. So things that have motors, electric motors, have those windings inside of them. If you have a big electrical event, if you have a surge in there, that's going to be one of the places it's going to show up. And those are going to be one of the things that is going to be damaged. And you could have motors in hot tubs. You could have motors in pool equipment. You could have motors in sump pumps. You could have motors in well pumps. So you just don't think of how many things in your home have control boards and motors, right? And those are the things that are going to start showing up. I mean, we have all kinds of data out there that the actual cause of loss from our data on things like well pumps and appliances with motors and things like that. I mean, it's between 40 and 60% end up being the actual cause of loss of high voltage surge. So, and you can see how that would happen. So a lot of those things are indoors. It's not necessarily weather related and things like that. So, um, definitely think of those types of things. And then I said it a little bit before, but as an adjuster, be careful, because with these types of claims, my personal experience from handling these types of claims and from my experience working for a company that who helps adjusters with this is, your claim's probably not one or two things on it, could be. It's usually a list of 20 or 30 items on there. Make sure they're even damaged, right? I mean, we see a high percentage of things that are on a list that come back that they're operating fine at the time of the assessment, right? Maybe they just threw a big list out there because they didn't know and they just want to make sure. No, something that sometimes happens is everything on one breaker is not working, so they put all those things on the list as damaged when really it was the breaker that got tripped. So not all homeowners are savvy homeowners. Not all homeowners know how all this stuff works, and they just know they went to turn it on, it didn't work, and I wrote it on a list and put it into my insurance claim, right? So lots of opportunity there to be careful, look at all these different things, and again, test. That goes back to testing. So
Yeah, well, and to your point, I think that's why it's important to get an objective assessment and inspection of those items, because you're right. I see the same data that you see, where it may come in as a lightning claim, and a lot of those items are found non-damaged, right, or due to general wear and tear, or like we're talking about today, another high voltage surge event not pertaining to Lightning. So that's kind of the benefit of StrikeCheck, a service like that, to go out and do that objective assessment for you. And also, I mean, you made a good point. We look at when I say we, StrikeCheck, look at all sorts of perils. Do we look at a lot of lightning claims? Absolutely. And high voltage surge? Sure. But we look at wind damage, water, mechanical breakdown, smoke and fire. So really, any peril you have, StrikeCheck can handle those electrical claims for you. So. That all being said, say an objective assessment has confirmed either lightning or high voltage surge damage to the claimed equipment. Does that necessarily mean the policyholder needs to replace these items?
not always. I mean, I think the adjusters out there that are handling these types of claims might have a decent handle on this, but I think be careful, right? I'm kind of thinking through a lot of these types of claims and things like that, and a surge event has that list of 20 or 30 things. A lot of things might actually have electrical damage, right? So now what do we do? What's the next step? So there's some common sense in this, and there's some economics in this, right? If I have my standard toaster or coffee maker sitting on my counter and it got damaged in a surge, I don't think I'm going to pay somebody to repair my toaster. unless it's a gold-plated, whatever toaster out there, right? We're not probably going to repair that. We still have to know it's there. We still have to know it's damaged, right? We still have to validate that, what it is, what brand it is, how old it is, all that sort of stuff to handle the claim appropriately. But I don't think you're going to repair that toaster so much. But not everything in our home that's electronic is small as a toaster, right? We could have things like solar power equipment, the well pump equipment, HVAC equipment, larger appliances like refrigerators, laundry ranges, things like that. We should absolutely, as adjusters, me speaking as a former adjuster, always use the RVR mentality, repair versus replace, right? So, and again, as an adjuster, there's only so much you could do, right? How are you going to know whether that refrigerator is repairable, right? You just don't. That's where you need to get help. Adjusters can be good at a lot of things, but getting into knowing whether a control board's damaged and if you can repair it is probably not some of that stuff, right? So you have to get help on those sorts of things. I use this analogy, not analogy, but this story a lot when I talk about this. I don't live in a very big town, and I can think of three different appliance repair businesses in my small town, and they all have multiple vehicles, trucks and vans and things like that. You know what that tells me? When it's not an insurance claim, what do people do? What will you do? What will I do if something happens? I'm going to call somebody up and say, "Hey, can you come and see if you can fix my stuff as cheaply as possible?" Right? A lot of these things are repairable. That you should really look into see if they're repairable before just, saying it's all disposable and you're going to replace it every single time, right?
Yep. Well, and you make a good point too. Even to your point, a toaster, you're probably not going to want to repair that, but you do still, as an insurance professional, need to know the cause of loss because that
Yes.
will affect coverage. Again, that's all part of that objective assessment to determine cause of loss. We do speak to repairability options, of course, but yeah, very important to kind of get a partner, to do that for you. So. Um, well, as we near the end of the podcast, and I hate that our time is almost done here because I always enjoy you joining the podcast and lending your expertise. We like to round out a lot of our podcasts with real life stories about our guests' experience in the topic that we're talking about. And so I'm just kind of curious. Again, I know you've got a vast um, book of business, if you will, as far as experience is concerned. Do you have any claim scenarios that you've ran across that you can share that involved lightning or surge claims? Maybe interesting. I don't want to say fun because none of these are fun because
No.
you're dealing with a claim. But anything that kind of stood out to you in the past that our listeners may find enjoyable?
Everybody likes dramatic claims, right? And they remember those. And I think that's one reason people, even adjusters, will get a little tainted. We see them a lot because they become claims, but reality, the big lightning hit claims and things don't happen as much as we think, right? We seem to remember them because they're dramatic, and we get more of those because we're insurance professionals. But in general, it's not that many. So luckily, knock on wood, and I hope I'm not jinxing myself, I have not had a lightning strike at my home, right? I've not had a big surge event at my home. Again, I'm knocking on my desk here, knocking on wood. I'm not jinxing myself here, but I deal with this stuff. I've had these claims, and we have some ones we've dealt with through our brands as well. One that comes to mind that's in some of our training we do is an actual lightning hit, right? One of those dramatic ones we remember. Um, and the lightning actually hit the roof of a home, actually created an opening in the roof of a home. Can you imagine that? If you were home, how scary that would be, first of all. That would be terrifying. Talk about feeling like you got hit by a bomb, right? Well, it just so happens in this home, they had their HVAC equipment in the attic. Not uncommon, right? And it was hanging from the rafters on chains, right? And just by the way, in case you ever wonder why they do that, they hang them from the rafters so the vibrations go up to the roof, and instead of sitting on the deck, so the vibrations don't go on your home. So just so you wonder, the lightning energy came down the chain, right? Melted the chain. We have pictures of this chain physically melted. So now it's going through the roof, the building product, traveled down this metal chain, went in and basically blew up this air conditioning unit hanging in the attic, went through the wires to other areas of the home, and as far as it went through a ground wire all the way to the outside condenser and caused an arc in the outside condenser as well. So it's one of the craziest ones I've ever seen, doing that much, jumping from building products to electronics and then traveling all the way from the attic to the condenser outside, causing physical damage. So that's when you never forget. When you see that one, you feel that one, and as a adjuster, like, that must happen every time, right? It doesn't happen every time, but it's a fun one to talk about, except for the people who's that happened to. Well, I'm sure that wasn't fun at all. So
Yeah, it was not my claim, and I probably will not forget that story. I'm just picturing, a giant HVAC system hanging from chains, and I figure that's going to be a scene in one of the Final Destination movies, right? I mean, it is one of those things that is interesting. And gosh, talk about a surge event, blowing a hole through a roof and then
yeah.
traveling throughout the house. That's pretty wild. Any others that maybe stand out, or is that kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear more.
So here's one. So we covered the dramatic lightning one. Now let's talk that other scenario we were talking about, where the grid causes a surge event. All right. And this was a few years ago now. It happened in Tulare, California. If anybody listening today is from that area, or if you handle claims in that area, you're going to remember this one, right? So a car hit some power poles and brought them down. We know that does happen, right? Sometimes they're able to repair that on site. Sometimes in this case, it wasn't safe to do that. So they went to the nearest substation and they turned off the power in this area. Power company replaced the poles, put the wires back up, got it all repaired. And guess what happened? They turned on the power at the substation, and over 1,400 homes had a surge event, basically in a blink of an eye, right? So 1,400 homes had damage due to this big surge event coming when they turned the power back on. That was a bad day for a lot of people. That was a bad day for a lot of adjusters because they got a lot of new claims. HVACI and StrikeCheck, we helped with a lot of those claims. That plays right into that scenario of, if the power's out, turn off your stuff, right? Turn off your breakers, because you never know when that power comes back on, they're going to flood it. And I had the question one time from somebody on one of our sessions that, why doesn't the power company know how not to do that? And I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm not really sure why they don't do a better job. And remember, all these grids around the country, a lot of them are independent. They're all different. They're not all managed the same way and things like that. So maybe at some point we'll get one of our electrical engineers on here to say how that actually can happen and why that they're not protecting against that. But it does happen. It's a perfect example, and it happens more than you think. So just be careful.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing those two examples, because this podcast has been all about what is actually lightning, that first one example, and then what was maybe a surge event that may have been classified as lightning, right? With the power turning back on. So yeah, interesting stuff. Well, I truly appreciate you joining us on the podcast again, Jay, and for talking us through some of the basics of lightning and surge assessments. We certainly appreciate you taking the time here today.
Well, thank you very much. I'm always willing to help out, pass on some information I've learned over the years, and using a lot of our data to kind of prove a point. And we know it's hard out there. And as an adjuster, anything you need to get some help with, this would be one of them. Because, like I said, you're not pulling out your own meter and doing these tests yourself. And if you don't know, you're probably guessing, and certainly that's no way to handle a claim. You want to get it right. You want to know that what you're dealing with is accurate as far as the cause of loss, whether it's repairable, things like that. So anything we can do at Alpine to help that make a little easier and make your job a little easier, that's certainly what we're here to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to our listeners who want to learn more, and I know you learned a bunch on this podcast, but if you want to learn even more, make sure to check our show notes. We've got some resources on this topic loaded in there for you. And you can also find our whole resource library and, of course, learn more about Alpine Intel's suite of services at our website, which is alpineintel.com. And finally, I say it every episode, but make sure to subscribe to the Savvy Adjuster podcast so you never miss an episode. A lot of great topics coming up here in the future. But thanks as always for joining us, and we'll see you next time.